Welcome to the Sharon Fitzmaurice podcast. Today's guest is Cathy Dunleavy, a local lady from County Galway, a mum of three who has recently moved from the world of nursing to health and lifestyle coaching. From her 14 years' experience as a nurse, Cathy says she saw so much suffering at the hands of preventable lifestyle disease and could see that people needed guidance and support in order to change their diet and lifestyle habits. She believes that good health comes from tending to not only what we put into our bodies, how we move them, but also how we tend to our emotional, mental, and spiritual selves also. Cathy takes a compassionate and intuitive approach to coaching and is dedicated to helping people not only live healthier lives, but happier ones too. So, Cathy, you're very welcome today, and thank you so much for joining us. So, I've given you a little introduction there, Cathy, and I want to start off maybe by going back to your nursing career. After 14 years as a nurse and then leaving it at the start of this year, that was a huge change in your life, personally and professionally. So, can you tell me a little bit about when you first started nursing and how things have changed for you in the world of nursing and what led you then to finally decide, that you had enough time put in the nursing sector? So tell our listeners a little bit more about that, Cathy.
No problem, Sharon. Thanks a million. And thanks for having me on. It's lovely to be here. It's lovely to see you. So it is. So I suppose I kind of fell into nursing. If you ask me as a child what I would like to do when I grow up, which adults often ask children, is, the one thing I would have said is, I don't know, but I don't want to be a nurse. That's what I used to always say. It just sort of happened by accident, and I found myself in nursing. And actually, I loved it. I did. I loved it from the offset, and it was always just for me. I think looking back now, even though at the time I wouldn't have been able to call it this, but it was just the connection with humans, like other people, just to be able to be there with them and at such a vulnerable time for them. And really, I think back to my early 20s, we're not really very well equipped at that time, to be supporting people emotionally and all that stuff. But I knew I loved that bit, and I knew I loved learning about that bit, as well as all the practicalities of nursing. And that's what made me, I suppose, stay in it for so long as well. I trained in London, and I had a great training there. I had a great life there. Probably partied a little bit too much, but I partied hard and worked hard. And then I moved home to Ireland. And I started working in the regional hospital here in Galway, and I was there for almost 10 years. And again, I just loved it. And no matter how busy it was, I still loved it. But it did change over the years, I suppose. It did change. And I had a family in the meantime, got married and had my children. And I suppose by the time I left, the changes were, it did feel very, very, what's the word? The level of patient care, the bar had changed and moved, and the pressure was enormous. I found it to be really, really enormous. And I felt like at times, no matter how sick a person was, you know, like you had to split yourself, you had to split yourself and you couldn't. And it felt extremely stressful. And while I loved that, looking after a person when they were really acutely ill, and even at that stage, I still loved that emotional side of it. Like, somebody maybe needing to be carted off to ICU because they were really septic, but, you know, like that part of trying to make them feel safe and reassure them that, we know what we're doing, it is going to be okay, and contacting their families and all that stuff. I loved that. But I found I was less and less able to provide that side of the nursing. And I was still able to just about keep up with the physical practicalities of keeping people safe, to be honest. But I couldn't sit with the person at any stage.
Wow.
And actually, you'd find like you were backing out the door, and you were like people needing to talk, and people so scared and so vulnerable. And um, just thinking of the millions of things that you had to do. And, so in that way I found it very difficult towards the end. And I also became very aware with all the lifestyle disease that I was nursing that really, are we really fixing anybody here? I felt like we're sticking little sticky plasters over kind of very deep issues that are very deep seated within a body that works totally synergistically, and I suppose the medical model is fantastic in certain ways, but it does isolate problems very much so, a lot of the time, particularly surgical, has that kind of habit of sort of fixating on a particular problem in a particular organ and not kind of looking at the whole body as much as maybe needs be. Um, so I really felt at that stage I'd love to just work with people before they get here, look forward and think, like, can we help people? Because what I could see was often the doctors and nurses were telling patients, no, you need to change your lifestyle. You need to maybe lose some weight, quit smoking, drink less alcohol, eat more vegetables. But really, they were at a loss as to how to do that. And in lots of cases, it was too late,
Yeah.
And as well, we were sending them off home without the support, the follow through at that time. I think in the last few years, there's more programs coming through with Healthy Ireland and different initiatives. There's definitely an improvement, but there's still a gap there, I feel, where people need help to help themselves. They need support in order to be able to help themselves. And I was really, really interested in that. Both the practicalities of it and the psychology of it, the psychology of addiction and of behavioral change and all that kind of stuff. And I followed some of that in my own life. I could see different things playing out in my own life over those years as well. So yeah, I did move to the Bonds Course, the private hospital, for the last few years. And that was kind of to allow me to study. It was so crazy busy in the regional. I felt that I'd have nothing left. I'd very little left, even for my family here at home, let alone to actually further my own career or study outside that time. So I did move to the Bonds where it's very busy, but there was definitely, people were much, much less ill. And it allowed me kind of the energy, and I did less hours to do the study that I wanted to do to move me to where I am now.
Okay, very good. When you are speaking there, about working as a nurse in the hospital, it's one of the things I think I've spent a very little time in hospital. I'm quite, grateful for
Thank
that.
God, yeah, yeah,
And but anytime I have been in, to visit people, or even just as I was in myself for a night for a procedure, I've
yeah,
always said, the nurses are absolutely amazing. But what I have
yeah,
noticed, just as you said, Cathy, is that they are completely ran off their feet.
mm,
They're doing 100 jobs,
yeah,
and the patient care, as in sitting with the patient or being able
yeah,
to hold the
yeah,
patient's hand, has kind of gone out the window in many
yeah,
hospitals, hasn't it? And it's a
absolutely, yeah,
time when people need that connection. And
yeah,
so I was just even thinking of people that were in hospitals during the pandemic, and they may
yeah,
have been COVID patients with no family visitors,
yeah,
not having the nursing staff to be with them,
yeah,
how frightening that
yeah,
was.
yeah,
So
yeah,
all of those changes, and maybe it's because people are becoming sicker, maybe there's more
yeah,
people in hospital, there's less staff, that everyone is moving quicker constantly,
yeah,
even within the care sector.
yeah,
We'd all love a magic wand, wouldn't we? And to
yeah,
make it
absolutely,
as perfect as we could. But
yeah,
as you said there, which is something, that we all focus on, that a lot of the times when people come into hospital, they've already gone too far at times,
yeah,
to be
yeah,
helped, and that there should be more prevention rather than the cure.
yeah, yeah,
So that's one of the things I, as a therapist, would work with people,
yeah,
I would say a lot of people out there isn't enough education for people. I think it's becoming more and more um, available, but still
yeah,
there's a generation or two that, it's gone to
yeah,
them.
lost out
Yeah, it's
big time,
lost.
yeah,
And as you said,
yeah,
the doctors and the nurses may advise them, to change their lifestyle and their diet.
yeah,
And they've done it for 70 years. And if they're going to
yeah,
change now,
yeah,
they might be, may not. Some do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely do. But again, it's a choice a person is going to make of
Yeah.
their own well-being,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Yeah.
even for
Yeah.
you, having that lovely time in London in your 20s and having the
Yeah.
party time, and that's what you're
Yeah.
supposed to do in your
Yeah.
20s anyway, Kathy. So
Yeah. I was just doing what I was told. That's all.
you're dead right. And I think it is part of having that freedom, before we
Yeah.
settle down and create a family or wherever we're going to
Yes.
be in our lives,
Absolutely.
that you did that and you stuck with the nursing because you did love that connection with people. And I
Yeah.
think
Absolutely.
that's really what every caring profession is.
Yeah.
It is a
Yeah.
connection with people. But I love the fact that you realize that you probably had burned yourself out after
Mm.
14 years,
Yeah.
and that instead of staying stuck in that safe environment where,
Yeah.
financially safe, I'm talking about,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
that you had the courage, to motivate yourself, even with that craziness, to learn something different and to change your lifestyle and your life into something you want to do to help others. That's
Yeah.
huge, isn't it?
It is, I suppose. Yeah.
It is, Kathy. I always think it is because, I hear of lots of people and they're in a job for 30 years and they say, sure, what's the point in changing?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know it now. Sure, like the back of my hand.
Yeah.
Sure, what
Yeah.
else would I be doing? And you kind of go, you
Yeah.
can do so much. We can all change. Not that I'm
Absolutely.
telling
Yeah.
people to leave their jobs, you
Yeah.
know, but when you do find yourself that things have changed for you, Kathy, and
Yeah.
again, becoming a mom, and working crazy hours, there's no balance there. There has to be a
Yeah.
balance in your
Yeah.
lifestyle. You have to
Yeah.
be able to give as much to yourself so that you
Yeah.
can be able to give to your family and then to your patients, because you have to be the priority. So if that's
Absolutely.
one of the
Yeah.
things that you're doing, when as you started studying. So what did you start studying? What's the first thing you started studying when you were still nursing? You went to the bonds to have some
Yeah.
time. What did you
Yeah.
first start studying?
I actually initially did, I was still in the region when I initially did some study, and it was in health promotion, and it was a certificate, a postgrad certificate with CRE, the Foundation CRE, the Heart Healthy Foundation, and NUIG, a combined, they were kind of an affiliate with them. So it was health promotion with approaches to cardiovascular disease and diabetes prevention. So that was back in 2015. I think I finished in 15. And yeah, I mean, it was a really good course. It was a good course to study. Um, People came from kind of different backgrounds, staff like from pharmacy, pharmacists or dentists even, or different stuff like that. Like it wasn't just kind of the nursing background. But I found it was a lot to do with kind of it was very helpful thing to learn about project management or getting like events up and running around health promotion, that kind of thing. But it was a very good course. But there wasn't any nutrition in it. And for me, I suppose I gained an interest in nutrition through my own sort of journey with not such a good diet and lifestyle and suffering the consequence of that. And I did start to learn about food and how it impacts our whole self, not just what we look like on the outside. Um, so I definitely wanted that knowledge to be formalized because I totally threw myself into learning all about it from really good, resources and everything, but it wasn't formalized. I had no piece of paper, and I
Mm-hmm.
knew that that's the avenue that I wanted to go down. So I did a diploma last year in nutrition and lifestyle coaching. And again, I picked that course because it had the lifestyle element. So I very much believe that you have, obviously the food you put in has a big impact on your body, but there's so much more to the story. It is just such a bigger picture that we need to look at really when we think about health. And this course, it looked at that framework and the different pillars of health, or sleep or stress or movement, or, how we kind of bring all those together. So not just what we eat, how we eat it, not just are we moving or not, how are we moving? And even, I suppose for me, that comes down to the nitty gritty even of what's my mindset when I'm moving? Like, so you could say exercise is a brilliant thing to do and everybody should exercise. But like I've come across numerous people who, for instance, maybe are doing crazy hit classes or really high intensity stuff and they're so stressed out and they just need to actually settle right down, come back to something very simple like walking for 20 minutes and maybe sort the diet out a bit more in the background of that.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just that kind of jigging about of what we're looking at within the whole picture, I suppose. And oftentimes I find when I'm looking at people, or kind of if they ask me for my opinion, or if I'm actually helping them out, it's usually what needs to happen is a pulling back to a simpler, point of view. Can we just pull back all of the sort of confusion and stress and pressure? People have so much pressure on themselves. Um, and I love that I've kind of realized that the way forward is actually very simple. Um, because now simple doesn't mean easy to, execute oftentimes, where we can be very good at complicating things. But yeah, so that's kind of why I chose that course, because it had all those components, and as well as that, it had a lot of behavioral change psychology. And as I said before, was really just really interested in that and how we help people to change the behaviors and how we help to motivate them. I studied something called motivational interviewing as well, which is just really good. It's basically, if someone asks me what's that, I will say it's basically the opposite of saying you should really stop smoking. It's very bad for you. It's the
Yeah.
total opposite to that. It's working off the assumption that this person knows what to do, and they have everything that they need inside of themselves. We just need to help facilitate their own motivations to come out and actually play out in their daily life.
Yeah.
So I love that. It's basically a way of communicating with people.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, that's what I've studied, and why I've studied it, I guess.
Very good. I love that, going to the people's motivations, Cathy, and why they want to do something, because a lot of people have said they reach a crisis, and I spoke to one of
Yeah,
my guests there whenever one of the weeks, and I said a lot of the time people will only do something about issues within their mental emotional self is when they reach a crisis, when
and they're
they're
in pain.
burnt out,
Yeah.
or in their physical body, when they get so unwell they end up in the
Yes.
hospital,
Yeah.
and the doctors and nurses and everyone is telling them, you really need to change, or this is
Yeah.
not going to end well, and they
Yes.
have so much fear then,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's the fear around it that is huge. And
Yeah.
as a lot of people say, well, sometimes we need to be scared into change.
Yeah.
I wish we didn't have to be scared into
I
change.
agree. Yeah.
Again, if it was like, how can people help you, instead of everyone dictating and saying, lose weight, look like this, do this, eat this
Yeah.
food, that we could be motivated in a positive way to do these things.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what I would say to clients is, well, how do you want to feel?
Yeah.
you know
Day to
and
day.
yes, and again, it's coming back to the basics, and that's why I like, when you said we're looking at all aspects of the person. Again, it's,
Hmm.
well, how do they want to feel? And maybe they're not sure, so that's where
Yeah.
you sit with them, you work with them
Yeah.
one to one. And I know that's something that you're going to be doing more of now
Absolutely.
with
Thank God. Yeah.
Kathy's health coaching,
Yes. Yeah.
that you are setting up in the new year. And
Yeah.
again, you have come from that stressful environment. You've come from
Yeah.
all of the huge, big stresses in your life, where you had the career, you had the financial,
Yeah.
independence, but it was
Yeah.
still too much for you.
Yeah.
You weren't living the balanced life. So we can have everything on one hand and nothing on the other.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So for me, it's always, well, let's find a little balance in between. And in
Yeah.
part of that, it was a huge change for you, that you could
Yeah.
be a better mammy, you could have time at
Yeah.
home with your kids, but you were
Absolutely.
also giving time to yourself, Cathy. And I
Yeah.
love one of the things you wrote for me. It's like that exercise was your medicine for your mental health. you know
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
the
For sure.
best medicine. But again, it's the type of exercise you're doing. Like, as you said, a lot of
Yeah.
people doing these intense workouts and being still so stressed, they're not
Yeah.
present in the exercise. They're just
Yeah.
trying to get it done, instead of maybe take a slow down, go for a walk,
Yeah.
do a bit of
Yeah.
yoga, whatever it is
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
going to help balance everything out.
Yeah.
Because it's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
just the physical, it is the mind, body, and spirit, which we're
Absolutely.
very
Yeah.
aware of.
Yeah.
So you left nursing at the start of lockdown, and you completed
Hmm.
your diploma that you were doing.
Yes. Yeah.
And you also undertook a fundraiser for Féileacáin,
Yeah.
and where yourself and your hubby cycled 500 kilometers over a
Hmm.
3-day weekend in October, raising 15,000 euros, as well as raising awareness for this amazing charity. So
Yeah.
first of all, how did you train to do 500 kilometers of cycling?
Oh, wow.
And then tell us about Féileacáin, and we'll go a little bit deeper into that story because it's a very special charity for you and it's very close to your heart.
Yeah.
But let's stick with the October 500 kilometers. Amazing.
Yeah, I'm laughing because we're after talking about the high intensity, and maybe it's better to just do it, and then and you're telling them about me cycling 500 kilometers.
But you were doing it for a really good reason.
I was, and I wasn't rushing.
No.
But no, so basically at the start of the year, I had signed up for a 50-mile road race on foot. Having never run a marathon, actually, it was basically 2 marathons back to back for Féileacáin. I suppose, Sharon, like I really wanted to do something that was very difficult because I wanted to do something that was going to require me to have a lot of patience with myself. And I wanted to practice delayed gratification as well. So, okay, Cathy, you have to get up and you have to go out and, do your training. And eventually you're going to get a big reward for this, but it's down the road. And that's something that I like to practice with wherever I can because, we often want our reward straight away. But that race got cancelled. And actually, as my training kind of got up and up in the miles, I was kind of at marathon ready level. I was kind of up at a long run of around the marathon distance. The race got cancelled and my knee started to give me a bit of jip as well, funnily enough. So at that stage, we kind of pulled plug, but we'd raised about €5,000 already on a Facebook fundraiser. So a couple of months later, I said to my husband, really, I want to do something. We have to do something. People have given all this money. So I said, let's get on our bikes, which he's a big cyclist anyways. I had done a few triathlons a few years ago, just short triathlons, but I had never been a big biker, really. But I did have a bike and I said, let's get on it and give it a lash. So initially the idea was to cycle around the perimeter of Galway County, which is almost 500 kilometres around the very edge of the county. But between the jigs and the reels of COVID and restrictions and the way we were attempting to set it up, we linked in with our cycling club in Ormore, Challenge Cycling Club, who were very kind in supporting us with it, even just supporting us in our training and all that kind of stuff, and organising it as a club event. So I started to train, and basically they told me that somebody had asked Sean Kelly, how do you get really good at cycling? And Sean Kelly's answer was, ride your bike, ride your bike, ride your bike. And that was it. So I thought, right, I just ride my bike a lot. So I did. And I wasn't working. And now I did. The kids were off school until September. So, it wasn't easy squeezing in the training. There's a lot of hours spent in the bike. But literally, Sharon, there was no major plan of action. It was just, I was on the bike maybe 12 hours a week, something like that. Out on the roads, hail, rain or shine, I went no matter what, and there was plenty of climbing hills and, rough days of headwinds and all that kind of stuff. But for me, it was always about following through and proving that this is kind of apart from obviously the main focus being to raise awareness and money for Féileacáin. But as a challenge personally, it was about keeping going when you absolutely think that you've got nothing left in the tank. And I know that in my life I've often felt like I'd absolutely nothing left in my tank for various different reasons. Usually my emotional tank, but the physical and emotional are very, for me anyway, they're very, very connected. So it was about that for me. It was about saying I can, and noticing how what I was saying to myself inside my head had an enormous effect on how able I was to keep going when I felt that I had nothing left, and what I focused on in my head, So we ended up, we were supposed to have a big group of 16 cyclists for the 3 days, but that became 3 because of the restrictions. Level 5 literally was on the cusp of coming in, and we just felt it was safer not to go out in a big group. But it did also mean that's physically much, much more difficult. When you're cycling a big group like that, you're shielded, and it's an easier situation. But myself and my husband and another friend of ours, Liam, the 3 of us took off And we literally we did laps around the county, and we did 200 kilometers the first day, and we did 180 the second day, and 120 on the Sunday.
Wow.
So it was extremely tough. I mean, it was definitely very, very tough at times. But funnily enough, on the Sunday, the sun was shining, and there actually was a group spin because the club were kind of covered to have a group out, So we said we'll go with them and have that support on day 3. And oh my God, I felt like I was just being carried along the road. I mean, I had cycled, 380 kilometers in the previous 2 days, and here I was, and I don't know what I just felt it was, there was just that energy of our little girl, who I know we'll talk about now, was there with us, and it was just beautiful. Like, it was amazing, to be honest. And yeah, it was emotional and fantastic, and I'm just delighted to have it done, definitely, and so grateful to everybody who supported us, because even though there's only a few of us out on the road, it was just a massive amount of people supported us by giving donations and words of support, and even coming forward with their own stories, as we told ours. And that was kind of the idea, to open up this conversation and to encourage people to talk more openly, um, about neonatal death and stillbirth. Yeah.
Amazing. And the fact, you just saying it's how important it was to speak to yourself, it's what you were saying to yourself over time. It was something that you had committed to doing, and you wanted to achieve, not just for yourself, but also in raising awareness. And again, people that had donated money to you, and why it was a very special charity and organization for you to do it. And it was amazing. I remember you doing it, and I remember going, oh my goodness, and I suppose when we think about 500 kilometers, it can be a little bit frightening.
Yeah.
And I love the fact is, just get on your bike, cycle.
1 kilometer at a time. Yeah.
And you know what? That's what we have to do. Instead of looking at the big thing and this huge thing that's in front of us, take it 1 kilometer at a time. I always say it's one step at a time. When we're to do anything in our lives, whether it's something we're training for or something we're working towards, you can only study 1 page at a time. You can only write 1 page at a time. You can only do one thing at a time. And you were proof that every kilometer added up to those 500 kilometers, and raising 15,000 euros, which is amazing. Congratulations, Cathy.
Thanks a million. Thanks, Sharon.
So we'll come back to the charity that you were cycling for and raising awareness, Féileacáin. And I'd like you to tell us a little bit about Féileacáin, but more importantly, how you became aware of Féileacáin in your own personal life, and how that connection became something that was so important for you at the time.
Yeah, no problem. So if we go back to 2014, we had a little boy who was nearly 3, and we were pregnant. I was pregnant with our second child, and everything was fine, no problems at all. I think I was very much in that, naivety, I suppose, of anything really even going wrong. But I had my first scan I was almost 16 weeks when I had my first scan, and we were told, actually the initial scan, there was some uncertainty. We were asked to come back the next day, but even at that, they couldn't get a head circumference of the baby, and they wanted to bring us we were out in a satellite unit, the scanner wasn't as good. They wanted to bring us in and have another look. And even then, I remember saying to my husband, it's okay, you go to work the next day or whatever, I'm sure it's fine, I'll go myself. But he didn't. He came with me, and we went to Portiuncula. And Sharon, it's a blur. Like, I tried to pull back that few hours, and really it's it's a haze, but basically we were told, I do remember hearing the words that our baby was incompatible with life, that she had a condition that made her incompatible with life. We didn't know it was a little girl at the time. Initially they said the word spina bifida, but actually what she had was anencephaly, which is a form, it's a neural tube defect, where the neural tube doesn't close. It happens very early after conception. So this diagnosis meant that they gave her 0 chance of survival once she was born. but that she would survive. There was a very, very tiny chance of miscarriage. They said that she's not likely to die in the womb. But as soon as she's born, I think a couple of hours was the longest they'd ever seen a baby survive. So I was 16 weeks pregnant, and I was obviously our world was just shattered in that moment. And we came home, and they did say to us there, you have options, kind of is what they said. And I didn't even know what they meant. I was absolutely all over the place. Over the coming days, I suppose we started to kind of figure out what was, trying to get our heads around this news that we had got. And we basically went through about 2 weeks after that of trying to figure out where to move from here. We had a lot of counselling. We knew that we had to make a decision. We could travel to England for a medical termination, or we could stay and just let nature take its course. And initially we thought that we would go, Sharon. It was such a long, long time to think of being in that unnatural situation as a mum, and we did get a little bit of help in kind of figuring out the best place to go and all of that. But when it came to it, I don't know, through the counselling, and I remember the counsellor saying to me, you have to try and find your gut instinct, and to do that, you have to be really quiet and just let all the noise settle down and just sit with yourself and your husband and just. So we decided to stay put, and they were brilliant to Portiuncula. They said they'd happily look after us throughout the duration of the pregnancy. And at that stage, I came across Féileacáin. I'm not actually sure exactly how, to be honest. I'm trying to think now, but they just actually, it may have been the support group that's also there for if you do choose to travel. Now lay me down to sleep. They're amazing. No, sorry, Lanark McCree. And they were amazing as well, so kind and just so supportive. And then when we chose to continue the pregnancy, I think they gave me the number for Féileacáin. And I met the amazing Jacinta Murphy very quickly after that. And Jacinta had had a similar story, but 20 years previously, or at the time, probably about 15 years previously. And back then, there was little or no support, when a baby dies. So I continued the pregnancy and continued to have support from Féileacáin and my counsellor throughout that time. So basically, Féileacáin are there for families around the time of neonatal death and stillbirth. They provide support via counselling, via group therapy. They travel around and they give information to midwives and doctors on how to manage the situation in the most, compassionate way. They provide these boxes
Memory
with
boxes.
the memory boxes. Yeah. So like for us, it was slightly different because we knew. So we had all of everything that we needed. Like, what do you need when your baby's going to die in hospital? It is very hard bag to pack. I can assure you. But we did have the chance to do that. But when you don't, Féileacáin are there, and they have boxes with blankets, and there's two little teddies in that box, and the idea is you leave one with your baby while your baby's there, and after your baby passes away, you take that one and you keep it and pop one in when you're burying your baby, and a camera and a little kit to take handprints and footprints, and a lot of their work really. And I remember Jacinta saying this word to me. It's giving parents permission to do, and ideas, but to do what they feel is right.
Yeah.
As opposed, because first of all, you don't really know, you don't have a clue what to do. I mean, do you take a photograph of your baby? Like, does that seem really, it's just impossible ground to try and navigate. But they help people to do that in the most beautiful way. And they've changed the landscape really enormously of how we deal with neonatal death in this country, and they're just, they get no funding from the government, and they're just fantastic. So they are. So they were there for me right through our pregnancy, and it was an incredibly difficult 5 months. There aren't really words, to be honest. And our little girl Doireann was born and died. She was 36 weeks pregnant when she was born and died. she died within a couple of minutes after she was born. So she did. And yeah, I suppose during the pregnancy, I really felt I was kind of obsessed with having some time with her alive. I was like researching, what's the best way to have her delivered so we can have time with her, and all of these different, what can I do? What can I control myself? And it's funny, because at the time then, when she was born, she took one big breath, and her heart was beating for about 5 minutes, I think. And she passed away very quickly. Her body, like the life went from her body, but like her spirit just filled the place. She was never more alive than she was after her body had passed away. Like I can't even begin to, and like I wouldn't be big, you know, I wouldn't be in touch with non-living, at all. Like, but I must be now. But certainly at the time, I'm not saying that they weren't words that I had ever uttered before. Those kind of that language is not words that I would use regularly.
Yeah.
She was just everywhere. She filled the hospital, and it was just amazing. It was absolutely amazing, and we were struck by a piece for the next good number of days because of Féileacáin. We were able to have her with us for about 4 days because they provide these things called cuddle cots. So they're actually as cold, they're special cots basically that you can have a little bit more time. And they provide them in the hospitals around the country as well. So we had her, and we even brought her home here. And we had a wake, that felt more like a communion because the celebration in the house was. It sounds absolutely weird, like when you think about it, but we were just, I suppose, the way we were in ourselves dictated everybody else's mood. And the kids, all of her cousins, which she has absolutely loads, were all here, and they were so to watch the children with her. This little baby that had no life in her body. And you would think that they would be terrified. Like they were, the adults that came in that front door were terrified. The children were just fine. And then once people came in and realized, okay, there's like a peace in this house, it just settled. And it was just, it was the most peaceful time probably that I've had in my life since she was born. Funnily enough, those first few days, it was a long, long road of pain and heartbreak after that. But we did get that first few days, and it was really beautiful. Um, so needless to say, Féileacáin became very, very important to us at that stage. But it took me all the years, like 6 years, to actually. I knew I wanted to do something, but I knew as well that I would know when the time was right and I'd know what to do. And within that kind of explains why I wanted to do something, a physical challenge that was going to be mental as well as physical, that was going to take a long time and be hard, because that's how it was. And I had to literally just take, at times, just 1 minute at a time in that 5 month period. And there was times I definitely thought I can't continue. I just wanted I was definitely, my mental health was very low at times. But I actually did manage to keep going, with amazing support, mind you, with absolutely amazing support and a lot of counselling and that. So
Well done, Cathy.
yeah.
It's a story we hear often, unfortunately. The same story as you've had when people are given that news, that their baby may not survive, or maybe everything is going fine, and then they go into labor and their child it's a stillbirth. And I think sometimes, which is worse, preparing or not knowing, which we don't know, because
Don't know.
I think for any parent to lose a child, it doesn't matter if it's a few weeks or 5 minutes or what it is. There's something about, losing that future, or the expected
absolutely.
future with your child.
Yeah.
And even the fact when you were told, well, this child has, a very limited time outside of the womb where, they won't survive, but that you even just have that few minutes, of that breath and the heart beating.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It was so powerful for you. And I think we've come a long way. Years ago, the baby was nearly taken from them straight away.
Yeah,
and
it
there was
was.
no
Yeah.
talking about it. There was no counseling. There was no nothing.
Yeah.
And it left scars in people's lives for years and years, and
Hugely.
it
Yeah.
huge scars. So for if to hear your story and how Féileacáin helped you and how helping
Mm,
so many families throughout is just unbelievable. And it sent shivers through me, because how do you deal with that? How do you deal with being told, the baby you're carrying is not going to survive?
yeah.
And then you have that choice whether you should go for the medical termination, which some people
Yeah.
choose to do. And
Yeah.
again, as the counseling, advised you, you have to do what's right for you,
Absolutely.
without
Yeah.
judgment. And I believe that to be true, because it is your
Absolutely.
body,
Yeah.
it is
Yeah.
your life, it's where you're going to move
Yeah.
forward. And you chose sometimes maybe a bit harder, knowing that you're carrying this baby that may only
Mm.
survive for a few minutes. But in all of that time and all of the counseling, Cathy, how did you feel in yourself? Were you angry?
Mm.
Were you angry at yourself? Were you angry at the world? Were you,
Yeah.
what was going on for you when you didn't have those people to counsel you or to support you, the
Yeah.
quiet
Yeah.
times?
I suppose it's just important to say, and I'll just say at that juncture, like that, I 100% support and feel that, anyone who travels or had to in the past travel, I mean, it's heartbreaking. As you say, there is no easy option. And
Mm,
I mean, it is a very, very difficult pill to swallow for other people to tell a woman who is pregnant and has been told that her baby is going to die, for another person to tell you what you should do in that
mm-hmm.
situation is absolutely nothing short of horrific.
Yeah.
So while I chose to continue that pregnancy, I like to just say that because I want women to know that I'm absolutely supportive of anybody in that situation, no matter what to say. And there is no easy decision. It is
No.
just horrific, no matter what you do. And to be honest, if you asked other people how I was during the pregnancy, they would probably say she was amazing and she was out walking and I suppose the community at large. I found it really difficult. Because there was a large element of, I suppose we were open about it. We took, we let our, my parents would have told, it was known in our community. We live in a small enough community, that it was known. But people avoided us. People avoided me a lot. I found that extremely difficult, and I tried to be, compassionate and say they don't know what to say, and it's really difficult for them. But that was particularly torturous, actually, um, because I didn't feel normal. I felt like an alien. I felt like, it made it much more painful. I feel than it otherwise would have been. And when people had the courage to talk to me about it, it was lovely. It was, and they would, people would say, "Oh, I'm sorry." And they'd nearly apologize
Yeah.
for talking to me about it. And I had to, tell them, this is fantastic. Thank you so much for having the courage, and
It's
that's
still
one of the
your
messages.
baby. Yeah, it's still
Absolutely, like
your baby.
massively pregnant.
Yes.
And I would meet people and I would see them just staring into my eyes and just like, don't look down, don't look down. Like, because I just didn't want to pretend that I was pregnant. I had full conversations with people at massively, I mean, I was huge now because of complications of the pregnancy, and they would just pretend I wasn't pregnant, and that, as I say, is something that I want to not. I had anger about it in the past. I definitely worked on that quite a lot. And now I'm at a place where I just want to raise awareness.
Yeah.
It's not anybody else's fault. I know it's fear. I know that it's fear, but I really, and actually before we had Darren, I was afraid of going to a funeral home or meeting a person who's recently bereaved. So it taught me, and I promised myself that I would never again avoid talking to a person, uh, that was bereaved, and talking about that person, saying that person's name, because I've yet to meet a person who doesn't embrace that, and you can very quickly know if they don't want to. But in general, I think people are, it's part of healing, and it's part of grieving. So I know it was 20 weeks, I suppose, from when we were diagnosed until she was born and died. So yeah, I mean, we tried to do the normal things, Sharon. I remember having Mother's Day here, and remember going off to like a like a down in Kirkland actually with my sister off to like a girls' night. I was like, I want to bring her to a girls' night. It was like a wine night and not drinking any wine, but I went to it. So like I wanted to bring her like, this kind
Yeah.
of stuff. And it was, I suppose it was for myself and, try to just function some normal life at that time. I was blessed with a boss at work at the time that just said to me, Cathy, you're not expected to come back to work. It's not, and I was at work in a really crazy, busy, heavy ward at the time. But that lady actually had a friend whose baby had anencephaly as well. So she had a really good
Understanding.
understanding. And I was blessed to have her make that decision for me, kind of. So I wasn't working, but I was feeling, I never felt I never felt why me. I didn't ever feel like this is horrendous. Like, if from that point of view, like, how could this possibly happen to me? I didn't really feel that. And I think that might be from nursing because you just see people, you know, like I worked in oncology for 3 years and the fittest, healthiest people walking in with new diagnosis of a leukemia or lymphoma. It's not,
Why me?
anything can happen to any of us, so
Yes.
I didn't have that sense. Um, what I don't know, did I feel fear? I probably did. It was just I would have been very low, Sharon, in a lot of the time here by myself, but I isolated within being low. I
Yeah.
didn't want anyone to see me being low. Um, but my husband could definitely tell you,
Yeah.
how difficult it was and how, I mean, there was definitely times when I would have, been right down in the depths of depression with it, and therein I say that, that people should have a choice because it is, mentally, it is just a big, big ask to live in that sort of abnormal situation for a length of time like that.
Absolutely.
Um,
And I think you were blessed, with Feilecon's support. Could you imagine not having support like
oh my
that,
God, yeah,
and, the hospital having Feilecon support them and
yeah,
support the nurses and the doctors during
exactly,
that time
yeah,
as well? As we said, they're so
yeah,
busy, they can't sit down and have those big long chats with you,
yeah,
that they
yeah,
have the likes of Feilecon coming in to support people that are
yes,
experiencing these different diagnoses. And
yeah,
again, what in another, how many weeks that they're going to deliver a child that will only last maybe a few minutes or a few hours,
yes,
and that there
yeah,
is a support in place. It is hugely, hugely important all the way
absolutely,
through it and towards the end. And the
yeah,
fact that you had those beautiful 4 days with Doireann
yeah,
as well. How
yeah,
was it then when it was time to say goodbye to her physically, the physical?
yeah. Oh, it was. I remember she was here in the front room, and I do remember all of that. The coming up to the time to go to the church, and having like the little coffin, and I remember just not being able to engage in that, closing of the coffin and all that kind of stuff. I remember what I did was I actually sat out in the hallway here in my house and I played the piano
Oh,
because I didn't know what else to do. And I sat there and I just started playing the piano just to kind of calm me before the church. But again, once that little bit here at the house is over, I was very calm. I was blessed with that, and it was definitely her, um, throughout the mass. And I actually joined a choir during the pregnancy as well as kind of a coping mechanism. It was the
mhm.
Lacka Church Choir, and I sang with them throughout the pregnancy. And then they actually, two of them came and sang the mass for us, the funeral mass. And I remember standing up in the front seat and singing every word of those songs. Like I
Wow.
wasn't even like, I was so calm I was able to sing, is what I'm saying,
Yeah.
and it was lovely. It really, really was. And it wasn't, I suppose, until probably a few days later, really, when the real crash came. And I don't think I have the words really to describe. The only thing I can say is that I really believe for people that their emotional pain, like we get physical, it becomes physical, it
Yes.
becomes physical when you get to that point where there's no release by having a cry. I mean, I remember crying and thinking, there's no amount of tears that can actually shift the pain in my chest.
No.
Or what I had was actually pains down my two arms. And apparently I didn't realize at the time, but I remember saying it to Jacinta, and she said that's common, because your arms are obviously empty and
Mm.
they're not supposed to be. Your
Mm.
body thinks, you're expecting to have a baby to hold. Um, so that physical pain, I remember well. And yeah, we just look. I did all the things that I could do to try to um, get through day to day. And I'm very, very blessed that we had Cormac, my little manny, who's now 9, to help us through it. I had to get up in the morning. Having said that,
Yeah.
like I do remember actually having to talk to my legs in the bed to get like say, okay, Cathy, just put your right foot out of the bed. Just like
Yeah.
feeling, and I know people describe that with really bad depression as well. Just that really inability to even
Physically
move.
move. Yeah.
Yeah, but I did move and I started to walk and I walked the roads and I used that fresh air and that walking. I remember being incredibly difficult to get going as regards going for a walk. And then gradually, I kind of started to become part of my day, and then I started to jog a little bit again because I used to run. And, definitely my diet and exercise served me really well. You could argue it was a bit of a distraction, and it probably was. But at the end of the day, it was shifting some of the energy. It was definitely helping me in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I had amazing friends as well. That connection with my amazing friends. Oh my God, just brilliant. Um, so it definitely wasn't a linear, like grief like that it's just up and down. And, oh, it's just madness. It's
Yeah.
absolute madness. And I feel that I do have it. When anybody loses a person now, I feel really comfortable with them. And I've met some friends in the last few years that through grief, that are bereaved. A friend of mine whose brother passed away, like, and he committed suicide. So her again, it was a really tragic,
Mm.
grief, and people were kind of afraid to talk to her maybe, or didn't know what to say. I just felt comfortable with her.
Yeah.
So that's a gift that comes from there as well, that I'm able to be with people, when they're feeling really horrendous.
I think I was going to ask you that question because that's what I could really feel, that Doireann gave you a gift,
Oh yeah.
and that gift, even though she didn't survive physically in the world,
Mm,
and when you said her spirit filled the whole hospital, and even the
yeah.
calm that you felt, and even when I say that your beautiful smile and your eyes light up, because
Yeah.
she's still very much part of your lives,
Yeah.
and you speak about her quite a lot when you did the 500 kilometers. It was
Yeah.
again for her, with the support
Yeah.
that Féileacáin gave you and her through your pregnancy and throughout. And
Yeah.
I think that's, I often say that to people when our loved ones pass, and in particular babies, they've given us a gift. We may not see that gift for a
Yeah.
long time to come because, yes, we're human and we have to deal with that emotional
Mm,
pain and loss, the mental anguish of what has happened in my life, what way was it
yeah.
supposed to be, and again, physically, how we're going to respond to all of that mental and emotional anguish and torture,
Yeah.
basically. And that's what
Absolutely.
it
Yeah.
is. We can't paint over it and gloss over it and make out that it'll all be okay just because you were supported. We still
Yeah.
have to go through that
Yes.
grief. And the fact that you've such empathy and compassion for people that have experienced grief,
Yeah.
especially that tragic or traumatic grief,
Yeah.
that you feel comfortable to be able to sit there with that person is a
Yeah.
gift too. But maybe you wouldn't have known that gift if it wasn't for Doireann, and leaving your life the
Yeah.
way she did. So you can find that gratitude now, Cathy,
Yeah. Absolutely.
after these
Absolutely.
amount of years.
Yeah.
And people that are maybe in that grief mode right now where it's really, really pulling them down, they're not going
Yeah.
to feel that yet. But
Yeah.
maybe, like you said, it's just talking to yourself, saying, today, just get up out of bed,
Yeah.
get something to
Yeah.
eat, sit
Yeah.
out, get a bit of fresh air, do
Yeah.
what you can today,
Yeah.
just today, just focus on today. And that's a big, huge word of mine. I think
Yes.
you're a
Yeah.
tremendous lady. And as you were speaking, and as I said, I met you a number of years ago,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you had struggled and you had come through quite a lot, but you had that motivation and you did have that love of Doireann that was so strong even inside of you then. It was amazing,
Yeah.
and it's still shining through. It's still so
Yeah.
strong around you. And I think you're going to carry that through, Cathy, especially now as you have turned your whole life around, really. You've experienced so much. And now you're going forward and you're going to be helping other people. And especially because of everything you have experienced, not just in your professional life, but also
Yeah.
in your personal life. You have so much to guide and support people with everything that you have first personally gone through, everything you've studied, everything from your
Yeah.
nursing background. I always say that everything that happens to us in life is going to lend us on to the next thing if we so choose to do it. If we
Yeah.
come out of the comfort zone and decide I'd like to
Yes.
challenge
Yeah.
myself like you did on your 500 kilometers,
Yeah.
I think it's going to be amazing. And I think you have a beautiful energy, which is very approachable. And I can see you supporting people from where they're at, not where
Yes.
you want them to
Yeah.
be, but from where they're
Absolutely.
at,
Yes.
meeting them where they are. Maybe it's the
Yeah.
first time they'll have ever thought about changing their
Yeah.
lifestyle. You know, they might have thought about changing their diet and thought of diets, you know, and
Yes.
they were always
Yeah.
afraid of them. So I think it's really powerful, you know, this conversation we're having today, that no matter what anybody has gone through in their life, and you have gone through something quite horrendous in your life, as many people have, and that you were able to take that next step, and that so many changes have taken place in your life, and you're here
Yeah.
smiling, and that you're looking forward to a brand new year ahead. And
Yeah.
even though you have these stories to tell, you're telling them now with a smile,
Absolutely. Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
just so beautiful to see. And I think everyone that connects with you will also see and feel that from you.
Yeah.
So, on that note, we're going to leave it, Cathy. And I just want to say thank you so much for sharing with all of
Thanks,
us and with my
Sharon.
listeners. And Cathy Dunleavy, I will put up some contact for her on the
Brilliant.
podcast. And I know you have your website under construction and all of that.
Yes. Yeah.
And, you know, if anybody is interested in finding out a little bit more about Cathy,
Yes.
or if you were affected, you know, by neonatal or stillbirth,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
you know, maybe Cathy can point you in direction of Féileacáin or someone that might help you, or even just to speak to Cathy, because I know she is very open and compassionate.
Absolutely. Yeah. There'll be
And,
no problem.
you know, as you said, it's lovely to reach out to somebody that has already gone through this or
Yes.
is going through it, and they're
Yeah.
the real person, the
Exactly.
real
Yeah.
person.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Cathy Dunleavy, thank you so much for
Thanks a
joining me
million, Sharon. I
today.
really appreciate it. Thanks for
You're
having me on. I
very
loved chatting to
welcome.
you.
And the
Thank you.
best of luck with everything that is going to open up for you in the future, because I think it'll be more than just the healthy coaching. I think you'll be doing a lot more to help people in
Thanks,
sharing your
Sharon.
story. So thank you so much, and lots of love to you and your family.
Thanks, Sharon. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. So thank you everyone for listening and tuning in today. And we look forward to watching Cathy Dunleavy as she progresses. And we'll have her on again, maybe in 6 months or a year's time, and she can tell us where she's going in her life. And if you need to get in touch with her, you can see her details below on this podcast. So look forward to tuning in and seeing and meeting the rest of you in the weeks and days to come. Stay well. Take care.